Hey, welcome to the Trippy Two Shoes Podcast, where we read about trip reports. I'm starting this up because I think it's pretty important. Like, it could be the fate of the entire world is in not my hands, but the ability of mushrooms. I'm not going to get too far into it. I'm not going to get too far into discussing ideas. I just want people to give these a chance, and the thing that convinced me to try them once and later grow them myself was hearing and reading about other people's accounts and experiences with them. Most of the time it's pretty positive, but I'm not going to leave out the negative experiences. I want I want all of you to be prepared to get absolutely, just slapped by them, because they can be fun, but for me, they were fun a couple times, and then it's pretty much every time I took them, it was more of an exercise, and I love exercising, physical exercising, but they're not always fun. It's usually more of a workout, it's spiritual, mental workout. And I just want you to be prepared for that, and to know to expect it, and to go into it with whatever mindset you really want. If you want to have a fun time, that's great. If you want to just use this for entertainment value, that's great too. But I figured I'd just clear that up since this is the first podcast here. I tried recording a while ago, it didn't go too well, so another attempt. My throat's a little scratchy. Not that you have anything to compare it to, because I haven't had anything up in the past on this channel, but let's get into the first report. So we have 5. I don't know how many I'm going to get through. We're going to kind of watch the clock. And I might have to take a pause here in a second too, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of seamlessly transition if I ever have to go tend to things. Okay, so trip report: very bad and scary masotapic mushroom trip. My friend showed me that we live in a simulation. A simulation. Okay, so that's the title. It's posted by user /thickboy. To start off, I have only tripped one time on 1.2 grams of golden teacher before, and it was amazing. All fun and games with my friends, who took some with me for the first time as well. However, I did not hallucinate or see things. This was about 2 months ago. Fast forward to yesterday. It was my birthday, and I thought it would be nice to take some shrooms. I hit up a guy, and he gave me 3 chocolate balls, each having 1 gram of masotapic shrooms, and also a small mushroom cap. Sorry. My throat's not cooperating right now. But I gotta do this, guys. I gotta do this. Alright, where did we leave off? Small mushroom cap for my birthday. So 2 of my friends were coming over at night, so I waited for them. They didn't want to trip, so they just drank instead. Fine by me. So as soon as my friends came to my crib, I ate 2 chocolate balls, meaning 2 grams of shrooms. Because last time I took shrooms, it took 2 hours for the come up, so I said by the time they get drunk, I'd be tripping. 1 hour after eating mushrooms, the guy I bought mushrooms off of told me to take the cap after an hour, so I did. By that time, I only had slight tingling sensations in my body, and my friends were really drunk already and very loud and hectic, which gave me anxiety. I tried to make them stop, but they wouldn't, so I just went to the bathroom, closed the lights, lit a joint, and talked to my girlfriend on the phone in another country. 3 hours go by. By that time, I hung up with my girl. Anxiety shot up by double because of my drunk friends, so I asked them to leave because I want to sleep. Oh boy, was I in for a treat. Sleep home. Remember, no hallucinations yet, just high off mushrooms. 3 hours and 30 minutes go by. I take off my clothes, put on my PJs, and light up the same joint I was smoking earlier. Here, my girlfriend calls me to tell me something insignificant to this story and hangs up. I had nothing to do, so I hit up my friend, let's call him K, on video call. I told Kay that I was on mushrooms and shit, so he asked me why I do that to yourself. He's not into this shit. So I explained to him that I wanted to do something fun and that I've always heard about spiritual trips from JRE and whatnot, and it would be cool to start off my 20s with spiritual insight. FK my A, was I wrong? I also slightly mentioned that I see Cleopatra's face everywhere. This is where I lost touch with humanity. I think I really need someone's help with this. I didn't know trips were this real. After I mentioned that, my friend asked me what do I mean by that because he never tripped before and asked me if I can talk to her. I told him that I don't see her in front of me, but rather everywhere, as in I can make up her face from the scattered tobacco on my table, for example. Then my friend Case somehow now starts insinuating that we live in a simulation, which is pretty effing scary because I don't know if my friend really brought up this topic or not. I told him he was lying and that there was no way. He then replied something along the lines of, "No, it's real. Sometimes the world can glitch." And as soon as he said the word glitch, the video call froze for a second. I freaked out. I was balls to the walls, mind-fucked right then and there. I started to blabber and say incomprehensible things. Then I asked him to do it again. He asked, "Do it again," as if he didn't know what happened, or more like he was not supposed to show me this stuff. Because then someone walked in on him and he told me he had to go for a second. He closed the video call and called me 5 seconds later. I asked him what happened and he said, as if in a comedy show and he's lying but the audience knows, "Oh, nothing, it's just my mom." I just felt so scared. Then asked him to do that glitch again, and he said, "What glitch?" Again, as if in a comedy show. And as soon as he said that, I saw him as if he is two pictures overlaid on top of each other to make him look like two people. Then he said, "I'm just messing with you, don't worry about it." I shat my pants. I closed the video call faster than when my mom walks in on me watching porn. I was so scared. He is my friend. How is this possible? I've known him for 7 years almost. How could this be? My mind was all over the place. I immediately call my girlfriend because I was scared shitless. I try to explain to her what happened. I blabber and keep repeating my friend's name to her, which she only knows by name and never met. I keep telling her, K, he showed me, he told me that the world is not real, he glitched, he became two. But little did I know my girlfriend was not my girlfriend as well. I felt like she needed me to tell her what my friend K did, but I couldn't. I couldn't make up the words for it. I was dumbfounded. My whole life was a lie. What I mean by needed to know is that she kept repeatedly asking me to tell her what my friend did, and every time I want to talk, it's like she is in a recording room waiting for me to say the right thing. The static on the voice call goes away. Her voice is clear as crystal, but when I fail to tell her what happened, she sounds like she's disappointed because it's as if her mission or her job is to know the secret that I couldn't form the words to tell her about. Also, every time I fail, someone comes into her room, which I recognize as her father's voice, but I felt like he wasn't her father, rather her boss or higher being that comes in to secretly tell her things. This goes on until I got freaked out and told her I want to sleep. But instead I go to my cousin's house, which is in my same apartment, to take some vitamin C fizzy tabs, because I heard that they help with the come down and just went to sleep. I would love your guys' insights on this. I never knew hallucinations were this vivid and real. Love and safe tripping to all. Heart. Great story. Let me start with this. Let me go back up here. So you said K, he told me that the world is not real. He glitched. He became two. So what you're trying to tell her is that K told you that we're in a simulation, right? I think that's what you're trying to do, but you can't find the words for it. And it can be kind of it can really, I feel like it's probably just getting worked up over something, but I understand why you feel that way. And it's because you're like more vulnerable. You're in a more vulnerable mindset. And this is one of the reasons they say to have setting right, have a good trip sitter. Someone that can keep an eye on you and keep things positive. Not that it's really negative if we are in a simulation, and I'm not saying that's not possible. And I was listening to another podcast yesterday, and someone was talking about how, I don't really remember where I heard it. I'll have to go back in my history and link it below, but he was talking about how even if we are in a simulation, it probably wouldn't be wise to act as if that is, like, change your actions based on that or any other kind of theory that can't really be proven. Just go about your actions as if this is the only universe, or whatever you believed beforehand, before all of this, if this has changed your mind to things. The one thing that kind of freaks me out, and I don't video call very much, I'm more of just audio calling, and I haven't seen the glitch that he's talking about where his friend splits in two, and we actually got a picture that he sent as an example. The person, Thick Boy, the person that wrote this trip report, this story, it's kind of, if you know what opacity is, if you're familiar with like photo editing, he had like two snowmen as an example, one on top of the other slightly, a couple inches above it. And the opacity is basically where you can kind of see through one of the layers of the image, and the second layer was a little lower down. I've never seen that on video call. The pause, it's like, okay, well, it's probably just a coincidence. Like when it paused when his friend said the world can glitch, which is pretty crazy coincidence, and if I was tripping balls, I would probably freak out too. Though the only technology I've really interfaced with while tripping balls is music production. For whatever reason, when I'm really baked on marijuana or mushrooms, when I try to pick up like Reddit or watch some YouTube videos, I just can't. Like, it just almost gives me like this sick feeling, which makes me think like maybe I shouldn't do it in my sober state either. Anyways, what I'd like you to do is go back, call Kay, and ask him, like, did he actually bring that up? Because you mentioned that you're not really sure if he brought up the topic or not. So that would be good to clear that up. You have a long friendship with him, 7 years. So I feel like you trust him, and you would expect him to tell you the truth about that. Either way, I wouldn't get too concerned about living in a simulation. Like, even if we are, it's like, well, we're experiencing the world the same way, and everybody else probably is too. Let's make the world a better place. Okay, let's see. We're gonna move on to the next trip report. This one looks a little scarier here. I don't think I've even read this. No, I've read all of them actually, but I did try. No, I read this one. I did try to record a podcast earlier, like I was saying, and it just didn't work too well. Okay, so I slowly lost my mind on mushrooms, posted by you, Mark Isaac 52. Hey guys, I'd never posted here, but I've been seeing a lot of trip reports, parentheses, good and bad, so I thought I'd share. Okay, so first, let me start off with some background. I was 16, and me and two of my close friends, L and S, had been planning to take shrooms for about a week. We wanted to make sure our plan was perfect so we could minimize the risk of a bad trip. I had taken shrooms once before, about 2 months back, but they weren't pure dried shrooms. They were an infused chocolate bar, and I had a great trip. The visuals were great, and I was in a state of euphoria the whole night. It was like there was just pure happiness inside me. I was only really experienced with weed, so I was under the impression I would feel close to or exactly the same as I did during my first trip. Man, was I wrong. You know, I might be noticing a trend. I don't know if this is really true, but I've kind of thought about this. And the trend I'm noticing is, like, you'll take mushrooms for the first time, and a lot of the times it's like fun and a good time and really positive, and positive in the sense that you're having a good time and having fun, more like you're taking a party kind of thing. But once they have you like pulled in, like they'll try to teach you more and make it more about growth in the mindset and in the spirit. But I don't know if that's true. And it's just true for me, and it's true for some of these reports I'm reading. Because with me, it was like fun at first, but then like every time I took them, it was more like an exercise and hard, and it almost became it did become like hard to take them. It was like a workout, you know? Okay. So we decided we would go to Al's house. He lived on a huge property with woods behind his house. So we thought it would be a good idea so we could go hiking at night while tripping. When I got there with the mushrooms, his parents were still awake, so we all decided to just wait it out and play Call of Duty for a few hours. Eventually his parents went to sleep, so we went out to the garage and S pulled out 3 Ziploc baggies out of his backpack. They were labeled with our names on them, and I noticed mine had a small amount more than either of their bags did. I didn't really think much of it, as we had all tried them already and thought we knew how much we could handle. Parentheses, 3 grams each. The trip, 10:30 p.m. We all ate the mushrooms inside of peanut butter sandwiches. I heard this was supposed to help with the taste and come up nausea, but really all it did was make them much harder to chew and swallow. It was like my body was making me gag, and every time I tried to making me gag every time I tried to swallow. That's another thing. They're tough to eat. Like, personally, I like them fresh, but there's this like stage where they're drying and they're not fully crackly, and that's just like the worst stage to eat them in my opinion. I never really like dried them out completely. I didn't want to mess with any of that stuff, so I just gave most of them out because I didn't want them going bad, you know. But what worked for me was lemon tech. That was just the best way to do it. Like, mix it in with some juice, and wasn't that hard. I wish I did it more than lemon tech, because it was like just drinking a cup of juice. It wasn't hard, like eating them. And I have done the peanut butter thingy, and like it helped me. But it's, you know, what helps me might not help everybody. It took about 5 minutes, but eventually we all finished our sandwiches and went back in his house to watch some YouTube and get ready for the come up. 11:15. I remember we were watching old Black Ops 2 trolling videos. And all of a sudden I noticed that things were starting to look different. Lights looked much brighter and colors gave off a kind of vibrant glow. It was like everything was just more alive. I also started to have weird thoughts that seemed to just never end, and everyone somehow connected with the last. I looked over at my friends and asked if they were feeling anything. Elle described the same feeling I was feeling, the lights, the thoughts, the patterns. That's when I noticed Ez wasn't talking at all. He had his head down and his eyes were closed. I started to feel a little anxious, but it quickly went away. 11:30, we decided to go back to the garage because S had some weed and Elle and I really wanted to smoke. When we went to the garage, I finally asked S what was wrong. He told me he was getting stuck in thought loops and he felt like time wasn't even a thing. It might not be. We don't know, huh? Then he said something that caught me off guard. He said, "I thought about my whole life in 10 minutes. I laughed it off, but it made me feel uneasy for a while. Eventually we started smoking, and it kind of drifted to the back of my mind." I don't know about you guys, but the few times I have smoked while on shrooms, it almost seems like it doesn't really even have an effect on my mental being. Like, it might have an effect physically, and maybe it helps with anxiety, or maybe it makes it worse. I'm not really sure. I haven't experienced it too much. I'd like to hear about that. If you've done it, if it helps. 12:30 a.m. At this time, we were still in the garage, just hanging out. We had smoked a good amount of weed, and me and Al, maybe that's my problem, maybe I just don't smoke enough. Okay, so me and Al were tripping absolute balls at this point. I was getting full-on visuals and laughing at everything, and so was Al. S, on the other hand, was sitting on a chair with his hands in his face, and I could tell he was having a horrible trip. He was saying things like life is pointless, and that he has messed everything up. I remember thinking of him as a dark rain cloud compared to white clouds, parentheses, stupid I know, parentheses, and that made me laugh really hard. 1 a.m., this is where the whole trip took a very dark turn for me. We were all in the garage. Oh, that's like karma. You're laughing at your friend having a bad trip and then it takes a dark turn for you. No, it's okay. We were all in the garage just talking and listening to music. All of a sudden, I started to hear a very faint low pitch in my head, and the music sounded sped up almost. I knew the song word for word and was trying to sing it, but I couldn't keep up. I started to look at how my friends were moving. And I don't know why, but it almost looked like they were moving in a time lapse. But it had the same kind of shaky feeling. This really freaked me out for some reason, so I decided to go inside. When I got in there, I started to feel a little better. I went into Al's room and GTA was on the screen. I decided to pick up the remote and try to play to see if it would calm my nerves. As soon as I sat down to play, the colors on the screen started changing and the shapes were morphing. I thought, wow, I'm really not okay, and decided that if I could drive in the game, it meant that I was okay. I got into the car, and I could not stop hitting stuff. This threw my trip into a downward spiral. Well, if you make the decision that if you can drive in that game and you can't, and that means you're okay, and then you can't drive in the game, then I can see why it puts you in a downward spiral. And I was just kidding about going into a bad trip because of laughing at your friend, and I get that everything's funny. Everything. It's not even that you were trying to be mean, probably. It was just there probably wasn't much that you thought you could do. If it were me, and I really don't know, but if it were me in my current mindset right now, I would have tried to be a little more supportive of your friend. But I also get not wanting to use the whole trip, just trying to keep someone positive, because then that kind of ruins it for you too. Though, let's see how S turns out if you mention him again in this report. I can't remember. Hopefully he turns out okay. And it was just that's the thing, you might be having a bad part of the trip, but it doesn't mean the whole entire trip is ruined. Let's see if he claws out of that, and let's see what happens with our friend here that wrote this. I decided to just lay on his couch and close my eyes. From here on, it gets really hard to explain some of this, but I will try my hardest. 1:15 a.m., Ellen S. came inside and saw me laying with my eyes closed and asked if I was okay. I told them I was, but I was getting really bad anxiety, and I felt like I wasn't even in my own body. I was seeing bright colors and patterns through my closed eyelids. My thoughts were running wild. The only thing I can possibly compare it to is what it sounds like when you're in a crowded room and everyone is talking, but I could clearly hear every thought. Yeah, I think all these guys are friends, or guys and girls. They're all buddies. They're all taking care of each other, asking if they're okay and stuff. That's good. 1:30 a.m. This is where things got really bad. I started to feel like I wasn't in my own body. I was looking at my stuff from above while also being in my body at the same time. I could feel and move, but my body felt cold when I touched it. It was at this point I started to wonder if the shrooms were slowly killing me. Killing your ego. The trip was getting more and more intense by the minute. I touched my arm to make sure I was still in my own body, and what I felt wasn't right at all. I don't remember what it felt like, but it didn't feel like what it should have. 1:45 a.m. At this point, I was thinking between if I was going to die or if I was going to be stuck like this forever. I kept looking at my phone for the time, but every time I checked it, it said 1:47 a.m. I was having the most intense visuals I've ever felt. There was a movie playing, and the faces were forming into disgusting, terrifying creatures. Everything in the room seemed alive. I looked at the blanket, and it started to move. I don't know why, but when I looked at it, I had the most overwhelming sense of fear I've ever felt. It was like the blanket had an evil, demonic presence to it. Maybe it did. And the movie, I'd like to know if your friends remember, if they were keeping track of time, or if that was the only movie they watched, like what it was, because I'd be curious to know. And maybe there are actually terrifying creatures in it, you know. Let's see. And the blanket, like, yeah, who knows? Maybe it's cursed or something. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, everything had changed. I wasn't familiar with where I was at all. It was like the whole room had changed. It felt so much bigger, and the walls were warping. Everything was alive, including the walls and floor. I was seeing faces in everything I looked at, and they were all angry. This is when I truly lost touch with reality and truly felt like I was going insane. Yeah, that's some pretty scary stuff, dude. I got an overwhelming feeling that I was being observed, like I was in an aquarium. There were higher beings watching me. I closed my eyes. 2 a.m. When I opened my eyes again, everything was still wrong, but it was worse. Everything had the same cut. Everything had the most sinister feeling. The sound on the TV sounded like it was getting louder and quieter. There were voices in my head telling me that I am weak and that I'm gonna be just another person that went insane off drugs. Oh man, that's heavy, dude. That's really shitty. I completely forgot what it was like to feel normal and was 100% sure I would never get out of this trip. I had completely lost my mind and I had no idea who I was or where I was. I felt like everything was vibrating and my thoughts were screaming at me, calling me weak, calling me a failure, telling me everything I'd ever done wrong in my life. I couldn't take it anymore. I figured if I was gonna die, I needed to just let it happen so I could stop feeling like this. Almost as soon as I had that thought, everything immediately changed. I felt like I had the answers to the whole universe. I felt the deepest feeling of connectedness I've ever felt. Every bad thought and feeling went away, and I just felt pure euphoria. I opened my eyes, and everything was normal. I was still tripping, but it was much less intense. 2:30 a.m. I asked Al how he felt. He had just been watching the movie the whole time. He told me he tried to talk to me a few times, but I just ignored him. In reality, I didn't hear him say anything at all. We went outside and smoked a joint to calm me down because I was in complete shock at what had just happened. After that, we went back inside and just watched a movie and went to sleep. Yeah, you know, smoking marijuana like after a trip is nice. Like that's good. that worked for me. That was helpful. After this experience, I haven't recommended mushrooms to anyone. If people ask me about it or talk to me about it, I tell them it can be great, but at the same time, you have to be in a good place mentally. Yeah, man, I agree. And like, I think the similarity this trip report has on the last one is like, you kind of get this like idea stuck in your head. Like it's like this little plant that gets, this little seed that gets planted, and then when you're on shrooms, it just grows and grows really fast. And one of the reasons you have to be prepared, like you're saying, be in a good place mentally, I mean, and be prepared, is you need to know that, like, it's gonna be over, like, it's not gonna last forever. If you just knew that, and you might have already known that, but, you know, I'll give you an example, like, I got really baked on marijuana once, and I thought I was gonna die, though I knew that I don't think anyone's ever overdosed on it or anything. I still managed to convince myself of that, so I can definitely see, like, even knowing things like no one's ever overdosed, like you can't physically overdose on shrooms, even if you know that going into it, and even if you know you're not going to get stuck in that mental trap and it's going to be over eventually, you could still convince yourself of it. But I do think it's useful to know that. Try to keep that in the forefront of your mind. And I also find it interesting that, like, as soon as you were okay with dying, like, that's when all of the bad stuff stopped happening. It's like you kind of just have to let go. And I talk about this all the time. Like, if you try to fight them, like, they're gonna give you a hard time, even when you're taking, like, low doses and, like, you're not even hallucinating. You just get this, like, feeling, like, it's like a feeling I've never had ever. It's different, like a whole new emotion, but I get it when I'm on them. And I try to, like, stay in my thoughts and fight them and, like, stay grounded or whatever instead of just, like, letting go. And it's a bad feeling, but as soon as I'm like, relax, just go with it, it's a good time, a much better time. Okay. And not recommending the shrooms, like, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't even want to recommend them because I know bad things can happen. What I would say, though, is if you've exhausted every other option and you're having issues, like, with mental health, like, it might be worth your while. It might just be worth your while in that instance. But I'm not going to recommend anything. Like, I'm literally just here to read the reports. And for me, like, I've never really had, like, huge mental health issues, and I know I'm, like, really lucky for that, but I still wanted to grow. You can always get better. You can always grow, and I wanted to experience them. And hearing about these reports is, like I said earlier, what really convinced me. All right, let's finish this out. Typing this out doesn't do it justice. It may not sound like it, but this was the hardest and most intense experience of my life. I had completely lost touch with reality, and I accepted my death during this trip. Those things don't sound crazy when you read them, but when you genuinely think you are losing your mind, and when you accept the fact that you're going to die and you welcome it with open arms, it really can do a toll on you mentally. I felt off for a day or two after. I couldn't stop thinking about the things I saw and the thoughts I was having. But eventually I started to feel normal again. I'm very happy I didn't do anything to myself during this because I thought about it multiple times just so I didn't have to go through this. I experienced things I didn't know the human mind could possibly do that night. I haven't touched psychedelics since then, and I'm not planning on it anytime soon. Okay, we got 2 done, 2 trip reports done. We're going on to our 3rd one. Having a lot of fun reading these for you guys. This next one's posted by Terrence Cupensis. 4G natal super strength psilocybin lenses trip report. I ate the shrooms at about 8 last night. My mate tripped on 2Gs as he has a much lower tolerance. We were very excited for the trip and the moods were positive all day, so we were... I'm guessing he was going to say, so we were set to have a good trip. I could feel the shrooms kick in almost 10 to 20 minutes after eating them. The come up was very long and felt as if time was going by extra slow. We turned on Rick and Morty and our trip sitter, another mate, just chose the trippiest episodes. After having our minds blown with the confusion of the come up and the confusing storyline of some of those episodes, we decided to sit on the porch where we always trip. There are big trees around and lots of plants, so it was a very jungle-ish vibe. I started seeing little galaxy-like hallucinations with my eyes open. They were on everything I saw. The trip started to become a lot more like a space mission after this began. At a time, we both felt as if we were not at home anymore. The sky was purple, and our trip sitter friend looked like a purple creature from some other planet. Everything felt magical. It started to mist rain and was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Next, we went to a more green planet with huge leaves and tall grass. Our mate was a long grasshopper-like creature. It rained harder now, but we stood in the rain because it felt so amazing and magical. After this, we were a bit more chilled and could see the place where we were actually tripping. We had conversations with our mate, but lagged out of time. He would ask me something, and before I answer, I would laugh and react. And sometimes even ask my friend that was also tripping what I should reply to the question. Then after I replied, we would ask the trip sitter if we were just talking normally, or if we laughed and stuff. And it turns out we never even looked away from him, and the conversation just kept flowing. Later that night, the trip sitter went to bed and we tried to break time and jump from dimension to dimension. We smoked some potent weed and we were actually off. The cars that drove by all seemed like it was in a jungle on a muddy road. The whole scene turned into a jungle vibe, and we'd be having conversations with each other, but either of us are actually experiencing different conversations. The night just went on like this, and we eventually went inside to go to bed. We got inside, tired as F, and could not fall asleep. My trip started to scare me. It felt like I was biting down on my teeth real hard whenever they touched. Even though my friends told me I wasn't, I was still scared. Later on they fell asleep, and I was left thinking I had shaven down my teeth. I looked in the mirror, and it looked like it was shaven down. I eventually made peace with it after going through a lot more, and decided to deal with it in the morning. My mate also woke up and again said he was having a bad trip as well. Eventually we both fell asleep and had the coolest dreams ever. My teeth were fine, by the way. Good one. Very good one. I remember reading this, and it's a really well written. Gives me a good image of just you guys having a good time. The jungle, that sounds like a good time. I love jungles. Overall pretty positive other than the teeth part, but, stuff like that happens. That kind of stuff can even happen in the sober state of mind. So anyways, I'm glad you had a good time there, and I'm glad your friend did too, although he did say he had a bad part too. But anyways, and it was nice of your trip sitter mate to be there for you guys. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, we got time. I have 2 more to go through. I think we're going to be able to get through them all. Let's see. The one before that one was pretty long, though, so, it all depends on how long each one is. Alright, this one's posted by Destiny's Horizons. Reflections from a 2.5 gram shroom trip taken alone. So I've taken much higher doses before, but decided on 2.5 grams because I didn't want too intense of an experience. Very understandable. And wanted to be able to think about my life without being too far down the rabbit hole. I also posted this in our psychedelics. I took my dose at 7 p.m. 30 minutes in at this point, I am finishing up the movie Superbad, which I have seen many times. However, at this point, I am starting to feel the headspace in the movie was not interesting to me, and I was feeling a bit anxious. I decided to draw on my iPad and listen to the entire new Kid Cudi album, which I have loved sober. The first song is Beautiful Trip, and it really made me feel nice and magical. I loved watching my Apple Pencil make strokes across the bright screen. I did this for about an hour and made some fun abstract art. I'm not an artist by any means. 1 hour and 30 minutes in, at this point I got a little tired of drawing, so I decided to watch some ASAP Rocky music videos, which is one of my favorite things to do while tripping, and it never disappoints. At this point, I realized that my trip will not be the most visual one. Even though colors are looking deeper and more beautiful, my head space is very emotional and introspective, and I was thinking a lot about my 13-year-old dog who was hanging with me, and unfortunately has congestive heart failure. I was sad but also accepting of the circle of life, and was happy for the good life she has had. However, seeing her coughing and breathing heavy didn't make me feel very sad, but I accepted this sadness and laid there with her because she deserves all the love in the world. 2 hours and 30 minutes in. At this point, I have been peaking for about an hour, and the headspace is still strong. I was happy with the level of intensity and knew nothing would get out of hand. However, surprisingly, the headspace I was in was surprisingly difficult. In high doses, I have had difficult trips, of course. However, on this lower dose, I was more aware and clear-headed, but that didn't mean the emotional part of the trip wasn't there and difficult. I started thinking about many aspects of my life. I have been trying to quit weed, and in the past weeks have gone from a smoker of 3-4 times per day to only doing it like 5 times in the past weeks. I felt proud of myself, and normally when I trip I want to smoke, even though it often doesn't make me feel the best and gives me anxiety. Okay, I was asking about that earlier, so yeah, I can't really recall, and I don't think I've done it many times, maybe because I did it once and it made me more anxious. So that's interesting, and I just haven't been smoking like for a while, for like past yeah, it's been like since 2020, so it's been a while. Mainly because, yeah, well, I'm not going to get into that right now, but yeah, I haven't been, and it's nice to have like better short-term memory. That's probably one of the biggest benefits, but I haven't been eating shrooms either, and like the whole reason, one of the reasons I started this is because I feel it's too risky to grow now that I have a family and everything, so I thought to continue helping people with these, the best way to do it would be to make podcasts. I could teach people, and I do teach people how to grow, but there's plenty of content for that already, and I think it's more important to get new people and I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's kind of part of the reason why I started this. Pretty big reason, actually. However, this time I didn't want to at all. I could feel myself changing, and that I have changed. I really realized that I don't need weed in my life. I also thought about my girlfriend of a couple months, who I have been friends with for about 4 years. Yesterday happened to be the first time I told her I loved her. I felt so happy that I finally voiced this to her, and when I thought about it, I was filled with love and thought about all our moments together, and how we fell in love over the course of years without fully even realizing it in the moments. Now we have built a strong relationship based on independence, respect, and compassion. For some reason, I felt a sadness or nostalgia that I often feel like trippin'. Maybe some of you know the feeling, almost as if you want to cry tears of joy and sadness at the same time. On higher doses, this feeling is much more intense, but on this lower dose, it was still very present and presented a challenge for me. I felt lonely to a degree, but I knew I have many people who loved me and should embrace this moment of being alone while going through this experience. This feeling blossomed into a realization that my father leaving my mother to have another family when I was a child really took a toll on me, a toll that I often ignore. I realized that it left a void in me, and his narcissistic behavior hurt me badly. However, this realization also allowed me to realize that those events are the reason that I am the kind, independent, and curious person I am today. I wouldn't have it any other way. I have always loved trying new things, and psychedelics are one of them. I have tripped 10 times at least, and have had a couple terrifying trips. I was able to reflect on these bad trips on this lower dose and realize that I was scared of this void inside of me. On higher doses, where my ego dissolved, I realized what made me panic is this void inside me. This void that makes me scared of not being in control, that makes me afraid of not knowing what will happen because my life has been filled with so many twists and turns. It was truly beautiful to dissect and not easy. But after thinking about it and looking at this broken part of me, I realized it will always be there. I've always known it will always be there, but I accepted it for the first time in my life and embraced it. Just because we are broken doesn't mean the broken parts of us are a bad thing. They make us the layered people that we are. That's really beautiful. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, I'm probably going to come up with, there's probably going to be millions of reasons to start this whole podcast thing. But I think even if people just listen to it, they can learn some really valuable lessons that other people learn from their trip reports, from their trips, just by writing them out and being the messenger, like you guys are teaching us valuable lessons. That's just another reason. And I didn't want to get too far into why I'm doing this, why. I just kind of had a calling for it, and I figured it was really, really important, and there were a lot of signs that I saw that told me that I just need to do this thing, so here we are. Don't want to get too into it, especially because, there's going to be a lot of reasons that come out that I didn't even think about. But thankfully, there was enough reasoning that got me started, and yeah, it's a good time too. It's just really interesting to read these. I could read these for hours, which I am doing. We're almost at an hour now, so that's pretty good length, and I think we have one or two more after this. 4 hours in, after thinking for a long while and feeling content, I decided to play some Xbox, which I rarely do at all, but wanted to stimulate my hands. I ended up playing GTA 5. Hey, you too. The story before this one, they were playing that game, which is a bit weird for tripping. I agree. I'm like, I don't know. I've never played games while tripping, but I don't know if I'd choose that one. I ran around and drove around feeling guilty whenever I hurt someone in the game. Then I laughed at my thought process because the game is so absurd and is meant to be. At this point, the headspace is fading away into a content feeling. 6 hours in. At this point, it's 1:30 a.m. and I brewed some herbal tea to get ready for bed. I should do that. I should drink some tea. I fell asleep easily after tossing and turning for about 15 minutes. Today, I woke up and attending Zoom class for my university and felt more engaged than I normally do. Parentheses, I have attention issues, parentheses. After I wrote this is my first real trip report, and would love any feedback. It felt therapeutic writing this all out. Oh, there's another thing, like, if I can encourage people to write it out, like, even if I never read it, like, writing things out really helps you, like, reflect and understand things, so there's another benefit. This is going to turn out to be a pretty neat podcast, but I'll get to feedback on that. Gotta go take care of my daughter, and maybe I'll make some tea for my wife when she gets home. So that's a good idea. We like tea, we just don't drink it enough. Okay, I'm back. She just dropped her little bottle. Okay, so one thing I wanted to mention about writing it out was, like that person said, it's therapeutic too. So I just wanted to say that, and let's get to like feedback. I gotta look at it here again just to see if I was gonna say anything about it. I think it's overall, it looks like you had a great experience. Learned some very valuable lessons. I think it's awesome that you're having this relationship turn into love, and it's a beautiful thing. And quitting weed, like, I wonder if it has like an impact as powerful as it does on nicotine, because you hear about people cutting nicotine cold turkey after tripping, and it's way more addictive than weed, so it's cool stuff. Like, overall, it was just awesome experience, and making art, that's great. Letting go of a dog is so hard, like one of the hardest things, and being accepting of the circle of life, learning that lesson. You might have already known it, and you can be told it, but really embracing it is a different thing, and I think you embraced it, and that's awesome. I'll have to check out the music you're listening to. I've obviously heard of Kid Cudi, but I haven't listened to too much of his stuff, and A$AP Rocky, I've listened to some of his stuff, but I'll have to dive into it a little more. thing is, I make music, so I don't have that much time to listen to it. I could make more time, but I'd rather be making my own music a lot of the times. So, but I will try to squeeze those in there for me. Okay. We're gonna move on to the next one. I'm glad you had a good time there. And yeah, I love reading about the positive experiences because that's what makes it like worth doing. There's a risk, of course. There's a big risk, not even really a big risk, but there is a risk. Could be big depending on like your mindset and the setting and stuff, but there's a risk it'll go bad. But for me, I thought it would be worth taking the risk, and maybe reading some of these stories would change minds too, but that's not up for me to decide or even really try to force my will onto others. It's just here to read the reports, make a few comments, have a good time. Okay, this is posted by Poopy Pyro. First time solo 5G trip report, emotional/mental torture. See, this sounds like I know I've read this before, but I read them once before I read them here. I don't think I've read this on the last podcast I tried to record, so it's not really very fresh in my mind. But it does look like it might be a bad time. But bad times aren't always bad. You can learn lessons from them as well. And that's something to remember too. Like probably the two biggest things to remember. One, it won't last forever. And two, you can learn valuable lessons. At least that's what I'm thinking now. That can change too. But yeah, if you're having a bad trip, try to remember those two things. I might add more or change those up, but for now, that's what I'm gonna go with. Just people that are like way more experienced in this stuff, by the way. Like, sure, I've grown and taken them quite a few times, but I'm no expert. All right. Tried shrooms twice before. First time, golden teachers, 2 grams with siblings, eaten dry, and we didn't feel anything. Second time, penis envy, 5 grams, eaten dry, I felt nothing. Sister tripped. Third time's the charm, right? I was still doubtful due to the previous times. Went with 5 grams, though used the lemon tech method. One thing I should mention about that is, yeah, not only is it easier to consume them, but it's like a shorter trip, higher intensity. 30 minutes later, I have all my lights plugged in, body highs settling in, strong visuals coming on, that were almost as good as LSD, just lack of patterns. Stuck on the PlayStation menu music, all in all, having a fun, relaxed time, just admiring everything. Finally get past the menu and head to YouTube. Putting on one of my favorite trip songs, Good News by Mac Miller. Listened to it a few times before moving on to Self-Help, another favorite. Enjoyed that song, then went and joked with my siblings, explained I was feeling great before going back to my room and putting Good News on again. Song finishes, auto plays on, up next, a lot, 21 Savage. This is where the whole trip starts to get derailed and go downhill. I wonder if it's because of the song, I don't know. You never know. First time listen, I didn't exactly focus on the lyrics. I was more lured by the holy sounding music in the background, but some parts of the lyrics I did catch on to. Something about this song just pulled everything out of me. I've always been pretty good at bottling up my insecurities and emotions, keeping myself in check. Lately, though, I had noticed I masked emotions a bit too well, to the point where I wasn't reacting to things how I should have. Interesting. So it's like pulling things out of you. Yeah, I think I have heard that song, and it's pretty groovy. My grandma passed away January 3rd. I was pretty sad about it, of course. And I think I've heard both of the Mac Miller songs too. Sorry, didn't mean to cut it off here. Okay, my grandma passed away January 3rd. I was pretty sad about it, of course, but I didn't cry when usually I'm a big softie. I kept a monotone voice as I informed the rest of the family. I started to think about this, which in turn actually brought out the emotion. I started crying, just a few tears at first, until I really started to think about her and my dad, who had also died back in 2015, killed in a hit-and-run accident roughly 20 minutes after dropping me off at my bus stop. I was devastated by the loss. It caused a lot of issues on top of issues I already had. I was a mess. I remembered exactly how I felt when I was informed about what happened. I started realizing how I could no longer remember his voice, even struggled to picture his face. Yeah, that's shitty, dude. That really fucked me up. I started thinking about all my remaining family and friends and what would happen if something happened to them. How I would have no one. I would be completely cut off and unable to make new relationships because of social anxiety that plagued my life. I could never find happiness or have confidence in myself. Thought after thought of every insecurity, every scenario that could happen, everything I hated. I cried so much it was actually pretty ugly and nasty. Those hiccuped sobs, hyperventilating, snot running from my nose, kind of ugly. It brought up my past actions. Used to self-harm, been years since then, but it's always been in the back of my mind. An action and feeling I can't quite forget, one that I sometimes crave again because of how good it actually felt at the time. Actually contemplated doing it, probably would have if I had something readily available. These thoughts put me in a much darker space. Sad started to turn into anger. It was a weird mix of being miserable and angry. I was mad at how my life was turning out. Mad about my anxiety and how much harder it makes things. And then sad about it all too. I actually recorded myself, talked about my issues, talked about the self-harm, the suicidal thoughts. It was, quotations, a lot. It went for a while. I tore every part of myself open and identified every problem. Remembered a part of a quote I knew and went to YouTube to go find it. Ended up scrolling through comments on the video. It was one of those watch while tripping. So the comments were pretty hilarious, and so it actually started to bring me out of the emotional state of mind. I was able to get a hold of myself. A big shout out to the people in the comments section of the watch while tripping video on YouTube. He helped this guy out. That's cool. Did I mention the name of the author here? Oh yeah, I did. Okay. Where did I go? Where did I leave off? Whipped up some courage and found my brother. He's one of the few people I can talk to because I know he doesn't judge and he's been through a lot as well. We vented together, talked about our dad, remembered some good times. He really helped me out here and was able to communicate with me well, had me feeling better. Of course, I still feel a little shitty after this all. The thoughts are still fresh in my mind, but also new thoughts on how some of these can be turned around. A lot of brainstorming took place after my powwow with the bro. I'm curious about future trips. I do plan to have more. This didn't deter me. I'll just have to plan out dosage more carefully, keep up the vibes, or maybe think about smaller issues. I'll be going to bed now, tired eyes, sore and puffy from crying. I need to rest them. Will read, reply to comments, if there's any, by the time I wake up. Yeah, well, I'm glad you wrote it out, because one, it's good report, and two, it's therapeutic to write this stuff out too. And to know that like other people will see it, I think might help getting, maybe that's not that, maybe it's more that people just like getting feedback. So yeah, we're going to give them some feedback here. This is a pretty heavy one. Like, it's really tough losing loved ones, so that's heavy, but it is good to let this stuff out. Like, and if you have to trip and if you have to take a bunch of shrooms to make it happen, maybe that's what you have to do, So I wouldn't be, you do whatever you want to do with them, but it's not a bad thing to let all this stuff out. It's probably really healthy, and I'm hoping you feel a lot better, or you did feel a lot better when you woke up from writing this the next day. I'm glad it didn't deter you from taking more future trips too, because it might have like hurt at the time, but letting that stuff out is good for you. Even if you're only going to, and I get that a lot, because with me, after taking some like a lot, I wanted to scale back and almost just have like a slight high, and I think I enjoy that a lot more. And you still do learn and grow, and it's also more of a good time. And if it does go bad, it's like not as bad. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next one here. Thanks for writing that, Poopy Pyro. Great trip report. So this next one, my first trip report. Awesome. It's by Bitchin _ Summer. My first trip report, the quest for understanding my depression, a very difficult but productive experience. Amazing. Awesome. Can't wait to read this one. This was my first real trip. Last night I took 2.5 grams of mushrooms in the form of tea and had a really difficult experience. Wow, I'm still a little out of it this morning, and the task of summarizing this whole experience seems a bit daunting right now, but I will try. I just feel like there's so much backstory leading up to this point, and that's where I'm struggling to form a good structure on telling this story. But I guess I'll just get into the actual experience itself. Yeah, if you want to tell a backstory, I mean, I don't mind. Like, other people reading this might want to just get right to the report, but I like reading stories about people, and yeah, I'm genuinely enjoying doing this, so I'm excited to do the next one, and this is the last trip report before this is done, so yeah, I'm glad we're ending on a high note here. Yesterday, I spent the whole day out in nature at some of my favorite spots, hiking around and mentally preparing myself for the trip later that evening. I told myself that as soon as the sun set, it was mushroom time. I was ready, definitely nervous and anxious, but just ready to experience whatever the mushrooms threw my way. My sole intention was to gain a better understanding of myself and why I've dealt with depression on and off for the past several years. That's a good goal. That's a good thing to have in mind. A good intention going into it. Any intention is good. Like, even if you want to have a good time, like, I don't have a problem with that at all. I wanted to understand where all of this negativity and sadness in me comes from, despite having a good privileged life on paper. By the way, I chose to do this solo. I live alone and feel comfortable alone, so it felt like the right choice given my intention for the trip. I got back to my house and started making the tea, boiling 2.5 grams of ground up mushrooms in my jet boil for 10 minutes, and then adding a relaxed lavender tea bag and letting it all steep for 15 minutes. At 6:20 p.m., I downed the tea and got into bed, put on some music, and waited. Yeah, I'm telling you, I would love some tea right now. My throat is pretty scratchy. About 20-25 minutes in, I started feeling it come on. I was looking at the back of my computer chair and could see little designs forming in it. It almost looked like there was a layer of stagnant smoke in the room. I remember seeing kind of a demon-looking face form in the back of the seat, and the trash bag coming out of the little trash can under my desk almost resembled a lizard/serpent-looking creature. I started to feel really heavy, and I could sense that I was becoming uncomfortable, both physically and mentally. I felt a heavy negativity come over my entire body, and it felt awful. The music was pretty good, but it felt kind of phony and distracting in a way. I was struggling to get comfortable and was in a very negative headspace and decided to turn it off and lay in silence. In some ways, it honestly felt very similar to how I feel when I smoke weed. Weed makes me feel terrible, My body is super heavy and I feel like I'm 80 years old. All these new aches and pains become present. My spine hurts, my shoulders and neck hurt. I can't breathe very well. I'm super lethargic and weak. I just feel fat and decaying. On top of this, I start self-loathing like crazy. I'm tossing and turning in bed and just lost in this overwhelming negativity and misery. I felt ill, like I had just poisoned myself or something. What was interesting, though, was that throughout all of this, a part of my mind felt completely coherent, and I was just observing myself go through this agony. There's this sober part of my brain that felt like I was above the mushroom trip and was analyzing and making comments about the whole situation as if it was sitting back and watching it all unfold. I think this was my ego. It was me. It was my voice in my head, the one that accompanies me every day. It was telling me that I'm a negative piece of shit. I thought, why did I do this to myself? This isn't at all what I was expecting. I kept saying out loud, I'm so negative, this is making me hate myself. My mind felt like mush. I couldn't complete a single thought from start to finish. I couldn't think straight. I was just miserable. My mind was flooded with shitty thoughts, and my body felt like it was about to shut down. I want to mention visuals real quick too. Throughout this time, I was experiencing close-eyed visuals, but it felt very watered down, as if I was viewing them through tinted glass or something. The colors were very bland and opaque, almost, and the designs/patterns looked out of focus. It almost felt like a 7-day free trial of some amazing software, but you only get access to 10% of it. At a certain point, I had a bit of a revelation. As I was laying there hating myself and telling myself it'll pass eventually, I thought, maybe I'm not fully surrendering to this. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. That's so cool. And I know I just mentioned when you're going through a bad trip, think about, how it won't last forever, how it will, help you grow. But you also have to let go, and that might actually be the most important thing. And I know I was talking about this earlier, where you get this uncomfortable feeling. Even on low doses, you'll get this uncomfortable feeling if you try to resist. So, let's see. I was managing the misery, but I realized I wasn't fully embracing it. I suddenly understood that my mind was in survival mode, just doing what was necessary to fight through the agony until it was over. I decided to switch my method and instead focus on the agony and truly feel it, to let my body and mind process it in unison as a team, to accept it and let go to it. This was kind of a revolutionary moment for me because it felt like for the first time I was truly processing my pain. I started welcoming the misery and almost became interested in it. as I had never observed it from this angle before. It took over my entire body and mind, and I just laid there in the fetal position, still and silent. I still couldn't really think straight. I was lost in this world of negativity, and I felt like I was feeling 10 years worth of pain in one moment. It was overwhelming, but after a few minutes of fully embracing the experience, I broke through and felt a sense of relief and refreshment. It felt similar to being in the ocean and resurfacing for air, after being held underwater and getting threshed around from a heavy wave that had crashed down on you. But oftentimes, once you finally resurface, there's another wave about to crash down on you and put you through the ringer again. And that's exactly what happened here. I went back into the process mode and worked through more pain and came out refreshed a few minutes later. This cycle went on a few times, and I realized that this is going to be a long journey, that I have just scratched the surface here. It has only just begun. At this point, it's around 9:30 p.m., so it's been roughly 3 hours of torment, and I observe that I am no longer in this intense pain, and I am now through the thick of it. My body and mind are beginning to feel somewhat normal again, and I sit up and feel like I've been through hell and back, and I'm trying to process what just happened. It was a mixed bag of relief and intimidation. Relief because I felt like I had learned a valuable new approach in understanding my depression, but intimidated because there's so much more to process. It feels like I have a trailer full of garbage at the dump, and I've just unloaded the first trash bag. Then something peculiar happened. As I was sitting there regathering my thoughts, all of a sudden everything went dark. My power went out. I had 2 candles burning in my room, and those were the only light I had. It was strange. With everything going on in the world right now, my mind went to a negative place, and my first thoughts were maybe we were under some sort of attack, or maybe the aliens are finally here to take over, or maybe, just maybe, the power just went out for a little bit. Haha. I felt silly for immediately thinking those thoughts. I laughed it off and decided I'd just write it out and see what happens. 1 minute after the power goes out, one of my closest friends since 7th grade calls me. Of course, I thought, to briefly describe my friendship with him. We have been friends for so long, but we are polar opposites in so many ways on how we approach life. And it has been really exhausting at times to be his friend because he drains me emotionally, especially over the past 2 to 3 years as he went through a lot of anxiety and depression himself, and I was one of the only ones he could turn to. So every conversation with him turned into a 2-hour vent/therapy session. This was happening daily for a long time. I got totally burnt out on being his friend because it felt one-sided, and have been distancing myself lately, but I felt compelled to answer, so I did, saying, "Hey, is your power out?" And he's just like, "Huh?" Turns out, he was just outside of the area that went out. He lives very close to me, parentheses. Like, literally the building next door to his was out, but his wasn't, which was strange. As of very recently, he is doing a lot better and being himself again for the first time in years, and we talked for almost 30 minutes. And it was funny to have that banter back. It's weird having him back, so I'm so used to his depressed, disassociated state that I'm still getting used to him being a dumb dick again. It makes me happy to see him like that, and I had some good realizations about our friendship too. After the phone call, I was smoked. I was still really out of it and not feeling great. I realized I need to take better care of my body. I have been abusing it for years. I felt gross. Everything looked dirty and I just felt crummy. But eventually, I laid down and fell asleep after some time and slept good through the whole night. It's the next morning now and I'm still feeling a bit weird. I have a lot to work through, but it was a good experience, definitely eye-opening, and I'm sure the coming days/weeks will reveal more realizations. So yeah, that's how it all went down. Thanks for reading. Would love to hear some thoughts on this. Yeah, I'd love to give some thoughts on this. It's such a great, you wrote it out so well. Very, like, wow, it's like a professional author over here. So, if you're wanting to take care of your body more, one thing I'd want to recommend right off the bat, and I'm doing it right now, is intermittent fasting. It has a ton of benefits, but the reason most people do it is to lose a ton of weight. For me, I actually need to gain weight. My problem is I'm not as heavy as I'd like to be. But yeah, I'm sure you might have already even heard of that, and I'm just jumping to conclusions that you want to lose weight, but that's just because a lot of people have that issue. But yeah, it's just good. I'm just happy that you want to take better care of your body. Like, that's good. As for your friend, like, if he's down to try some, I don't know, maybe you could give him some, or just tell him about it. If he's having mental issues too, and you guys could even take them together, and that really bonds people when you trip together. But the wave analogy was so good. Like, that's awesome. And now you made me think, like, am I even correct about how you just go with it and it's not as bad? Because even if you do go with it, it can be bad. Like, it's not like just letting go will absolve you from the bad trip. And maybe I just thought I had it under control, because it's like that wave thing where it comes in and out, and I just think that every time the uncomfortable part goes away, it's because I'm letting go, where in reality, maybe I'm letting go the whole time, and it's more like you just have these waves of, yeah, it's like, almost like doing sets when you work out, like you're lifting, and that's the hard part, and you stop, but you're breaking yourself down, getting stronger. You don't get stronger from lifting the weights, but from like resting afterwards. And it might be the same for mushrooms. Like, it breaks you down mentally and spiritually, and as you're recovering from the trip the next day, or when it wears off, or even during the trip, you become stronger mentally and spiritually, which usually leads to more physical strength, because you have the power to give up things that are bad for you. It's awesome stuff. But in general, I think it is good to just go with it and embrace. And I remember hearing about, like, when you're in pain, like, you should be mindful of it and, like, actually just feel it. And that always seemed like counterproductive to me, but it actually helps a lot. So I'm glad you discovered that. And it's so fascinating, all the things you can discover on these little guys. But I had a great time reading these. I'm excited for the next podcast. Yeah, and in general, I'm glad most of you guys all had great experiences. You've learned a lot. I've learned a lot just reading these, and I've had a lot of fun doing it too. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe with the bell icon, and give this video a like if you want to help me out. And the subscription with the bell icon will notify you when we have another one out too. So, again, thanks for tuning in. See you soon. Okay, one more thing. I can't mention intermittent fasting without also mentioning the Wim Hof method. And I'm not going to get too far into it, but I will say I've had a lot of success with it, and so have other people. So you want to check that out too, if you're wanting to take care of your body. The breathing method and the cold exposure. There are things you want to watch out for, and like safety precautions and stuff, so do your own research on it. And yeah, that's all I wanted to mention. Hope it helps you out.